Welcome in. My name's Jason Priester of the Clemson Insider. Appreciate everybody that is tuned in with us here tonight. Feels like it's been a minute since we've done this. Didn't do the show last week. Week 4 last, we were live on location there in Kiowee, so that's a little bit different. So it feels like it's kind of been a minute since we've done this, and it really has. Last time we were, or the week before the Kiowee show, we had kind of turned this into the baseball show, but we've kind of pivoted on that. We're not going to do that, at least while spring practice is going on. We might change it back once football starts, but we're going back to regularly scheduled program for tonight. Looks like my light over here is about to crap out on me. Before we get started, I want to thank our title sponsor, Trey Humphreys with Old River Real Estate. He's looking to expand his clientele by providing the best customer service in the industry. Residential, commercial, investing, buying, or selling. Trey would love the opportunity to help you. Just give him a call, 843-617-6548. Trey Humphreys with Old River Real Estate. Also a shout out to Adams Pest and Termite Control. They take care of your pests, termites. They do moisture control right here in the PD. Give Mike and his crew a call, 843-858-3166. Not the best of weekends there on the baseball diamond for Clemson. On the other side of that, you get a third consecutive appearance in the NCAA tournament for the basketball team. I didn't get to watch a whole lot of baseball this weekend. I was in Charlotte at the ACC tournament. Can't say that I was really expecting to stay as long as we did. But, man, that was a fun little run they put together. Duke brought it to a screeching halt. I think Duke's a bad matchup for Clemson to begin with. You take Carter Whelan out of the equation, and it's an even worse one. But on to the NCAA tournament. Hey, man, that's the third year in a row. There's a lot of people out there that don't like Brad Brownell for whatever reason. I think this year might have been one of his best coaching jobs yet. They got one of the lower payrolls in the ACC. I mean, it doesn't even – if you look at some of the money teams like Duke and North Carolina and Louisville and a couple of these other teams spend, Clemson's not even in the same stratosphere. Yet he finds a way to keep them competitive, and he's done it this year without, like a superstar. You don't have that one go-to guy. It's kind of just a team full of glue guys, if you will, and they all work well together. I would be interested to see exactly what kind of difference a healthy Zach Foster would have made. He would have had basically a season under his belt at this point. He was really kind of starting to take off when he tore the ACL, but Whelan tearing his, that is just a brutal blow. And you hate it for that kid. Part of the reason why he came to Clemson was to play in the NCAA tournament. He's kind of getting robbed of that. But yeah, I fully believe this has been one of Brownell's best coaching jobs yet, and this matchup they got with Iowa, it's going to be an interesting one. Iowa's got the guy that averages 20 points per game. I think they're kind of a slight favorite. Yeah, matter of fact, I see somebody's got it over here. Iowa's a 2.5-point favorite. This is one of to me, it's kind of a pick 'em kind of deal, and it's going to largely hinge on whether or not the guards show up for Clemson. When the guards come out and they're defending well and hitting some shots, they're hard to beat. But when they're not hitting shots and they're not defending, they don't have quite the juice on the defensive end, then that's when they get in trouble. They're going to have about, they last played on Friday, so they're going to have about a week off. They're going to have a week off between games. So they should be good and rested up, because I thought, I thought there Friday night against Duke they looked like a team that had played 3 straight days and 3 straight games at 9:30 at night. They didn't, especially in the first half. They just didn't look like they had their legs. A lot of the shots were hitting off the front of the rim. But I do think this is a game they can win. But again, it's gonna hinge on how those guards play. You're gonna have to get, Dylan Hunter's never gonna be a consistent 10, 15 point a game guy, but you're gonna have to get a little bit from him on the offensive end, but you're really gonna have to get it on the defensive end. You really need Porter and Johnson or a couple of those guards to hit some shots consistently. And they need to do it for 40 minutes, not just 35 or 30 or 20. They need to do it for 40 minutes. Get past Iowa, then it gets real very quickly. You matched up with 1 seed Florida, but first and foremost, you got to get by Iowa. And somebody posed a question earlier today in a Facebook group I'm in on Facebook. What does Clemson need to do in the tournament to make this a successful season? My answer to that is the season's already a success in my eyes, because I didn't even know whether this was an NCAA tournament team coming into the season. They finished 2 spots ahead of where they were picked in the preseason rankings. They had a really good run in the ACC tournament, and now they're in the NCAA tournament. Add in the kind of payroll you're working with, and this might be one of Brownell's best jobs coaching-wise to date. But I think getting into the tournament with this team is a success. I don't care what happens on Friday against Iowa. Anything else beyond getting in is icing on the cake, in my opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with that, but that's kind of the way I see it. Baseball gets set for a 5-game road swing. You got 2 in Charleston this week. You play College of Charleston in Mount Pleasant on Tuesday. Then you get the Citadel there in Charleston on Wednesday. Dylan Harrison gets the starting nod there against College of Charleston tomorrow. They didn't announce a starter for Wednesday. I would assume it's probably going to be Eston Simpson, but it might depend on what happens Tuesday. They kind of need a bounce back week, man. They ran into a buzzsaw against Georgia Tech. And again, I didn't get to watch a whole lot of the Friday game. I really didn't watch much of the Friday game at all. I kind of watched that Saturday game. I didn't get to watch much of the Thursday game at all. This Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, it always throws me off. I didn't get to watch much of the Thursday game at all. I saw a couple of the highlights. Kind of watched the Friday game, and then I was at the Saturday game. You kind of ran into a buzzsaw there against Georgia Tech. That they're ranked number 3 in the D1 rankings today, and rightfully so. Those guys, man, I don't know that I've seen a team, at least a college team, in person that hits the ball the way that even their outs are 95, 100, 101 mile an hour off the bat. I mean, they just mashed the ball. It was, especially Saturday, man. It was fun to watch those guys, man. That catcher they got, man. He won ACC Player of the Week this week. His name's escaping me right off the top of my head here, but golly, I can't believe I can't think of his name. But that guy, man, you want to talk about the real deal? That guy is the real deal. Lackey. That's what I'm trying to think of, Lackey. And then you got Drew Burroughs, man. There's not a weak spot in their lineup. Their number 9 hole guys hitting over 400. Their 8 hole guys hitting well over 300. They do not have a weak spot in that lineup. The key to beating those guys, in my opinion, is getting into that bullpen. Clemson wasn't able to do it Friday or Thursday. They weren't able to do it Friday. They finally did it Saturday, and we saw what happened. And you finally get a outing from Aiden Canuck where he's not walking guys, and they kill him. He gave up 3 or 4 home runs in that game, and one of them Man, I still don't know how to ball that guy hit that ball out of the park. Man, he threw it up and in. It was several inches off the plate, and he still turns on and jacks it. Not just over the fence, way out the park. His ERA goes from what was it, 2 point something, 2.7 up to it's over 5 now. Sharman I know they didn't win on Friday. I thought Sharman had a little bit of tough luck. You take it, when he comes out, I think it was 4-2. So, it's still a ball game. I can't remember who they brought in right behind Sharman. I think I got it pulled up right here. But it's 4-2 and you go to Joe Allen, right? That's your ground ball guy. And he comes in and he gets the ground ball. He comes in after Simerson. But you get the ground ball, man, and it's so deep in the hole at shortstop, you can't get anybody out. Everybody's safe. Next guy hits one out the park, ball game. If you're Eric Bakich, do you consider making that move and putting Sharman in the Friday spot and maybe putting Knopp further back into rotation? I have no idea if that's on the table. I'm just saying, do you do that? Because if you're going to do it, this week kind of gives you the perfect opportunity to do it with the Thursday, Friday, Saturday series last week. And you're playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can move him up, on a normal week's rest. So that might be something worth keeping an eye on. Thought it was interesting that I did listen to Bakich's post game after that game that night, and I thought it was interesting that he used the word nibble, because that's a word that me and a couple of my buddies have been using about Canuck all season long. Is he's doing more nibbling than anything. And he got killed, right? Matter of fact, I thought he got a little bit more to plate Thursday night than he has been all season long. Probably too much of the plate in some instances, but at least one of those balls, man, I still don't even know how that guy hit that thing out of there. Spring practice for football, although the spring game is less than 2 weeks away. That's hard to believe. We're sitting here, it's barely the middle of March, and spring game is less than 2 weeks away. All you big believers in Chris Denson, it's not sounding too good for his chances of winning that job, or at least based on what I've heard. We've had 2 viewing windows so far. I have yet to go to either one. The first one was the same day of the Clemson South Carolina baseball game in Columbia, and I was there. The second one was last Friday, maybe. Whatever day it was, I was on vacation. I can't remember. So I wasn't able to go to that one. We get one more next Monday. I'll be at that one. But, from just based on some things I've heard, I wouldn't be shocked if Denson's not even the backup, by the end of the year. That's how good Tate Reynolds just looked. Can baseball make a 5-0 run this week? I think they can. I mean, that's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities, but I don't think you have to go 5-0. I think you definitely want to take the 2 midweek games, and you want to go up to Notre Dame and take 2 out of 3 minimum. You at least need to be 4-1 coming out of the weekend. This Notre Dame series is a big series for them. Sweeping would be great, but I mean, I think you got to take 2 out of 3, considering the way, not just that you lost 2 out of 3 to Georgia Tech, but the way you lost those 2 games. You weren't even competitive in game 1. You were competitive for about half of the game in game 2, and they blew it open, and you didn't have no answer. You kind of jumped on them in game 3, and we're sitting up there in the press box. Clemson's got that big lead. Matter of fact, they were 1 run away from getting the run rule, and we're like, man, you better score some more, because you can't ever have too many runs for this offense of Georgia Tech. But they ended up finishing that thing off. Another thing that I thought was interesting from the game 3 was Drew Titsworth started and not Talon Bell. So it seems like we've already seen one tweak to the rotation, which is I kind of thought Titsworth would get inserted at some point, but it seems we have now approached that point. But yeah, it's a big series this weekend. Absolutely, you've got to go up there and take 2 out of 3. And for those of you that don't know, only one of those games are going to be televised. The other 2, there won't be a stream, anything. You have to listen to it on the radio or keep up with the live stats, or just check the website for the gamer. But that's another odd thing. How do you not have those games streamed at least? Tells you what Notre Dame thinks about their baseball up there. Things cooked down really fast on the football commitment front. Are you talking about the number of commitments coming out of the elite retreat? I wasn't really expecting many, to be quite honest. I thought if there was gonna be one, it might be the wide receiver Jamar Simmons. But I wasn't expecting it. But I do think that there will be several of those guys that attended last weekend that end up becoming a part of the class at some point. I'm not so sure that it's a good thing to get those commitments this early in the process anymore anyways. That the longer they're committed to you, the more opportunity somebody has to come in and poach them. It might end up suiting you better to not have those guys jump on board until the summer at least. So it might be a blessing in disguise that a bunch of them didn't pop off this weekend, even though, they had a bunch pop off after the event last year, and they ended up holding on to all but one of them. The Gephardt kid, if I'm remembering right, I think that's the only one they lost from that event. But the way that recruiting goes now, it might be a good thing that you didn't, nail down 4 or 5, whatever. The Kish one did kind of come out of nowhere for me. Again, I was on vacation last weekend, so I wasn't talking to anybody or anything. That thing popped off late that night and caught me by surprise. Matter of fact, I had kind of been playing text tag with the kid all day long. I had been trying to get him on the phone, and we just couldn't hook up. And then that night he goes ahead and makes it public. But that linebacker's a position of need in this class. You already have one in Max Brown. Now this kid gives you 2. So you're positioned much better than you were this time last year, this time the year before last. Wouldn't be shocked if they took another one. Ace Buckner is the key. I will say this. I don't know that he's the key, but they are much better when he's on offensively. Make no mistake. You need one of those guards minimum hitting shots. You can't have all of them being ice cold. But I think this year, playing as much as Ace did is going to benefit him tremendously moving forward. You'll have him in the backcourt next year. It'll be him and Zach Foster, and then you add Harris Reynolds into that mix. Kid just won a state title. He had an absolutely monster senior season. So Clemson should be pretty good at the guard spot next year, even though they are losing Porter, and I'm pretty sure Johnson's out too, and Hunter. They'll be a little bit younger, but man, those are 3 really good guards. But yeah, anytime Ace is on, man, he's Clemson's better for it. He had a rough night against Duke. Don't make no mistake, he was not the only one that had a rough night shooting the ball that night. But I think I want to say he was like 2 of 10 or something like that. I think that was the game. He was 2 of 10. Anyways, they're starting to run together. Let's just say one of those nights he had a rough night. That's kind of going to be the next step for him is just being a little bit more consistent and cutting down on the turnovers. But Yeah, I think Ace has got a very bright future. Right here, yeah. Kind of what I was just saying. Did it's unfortunate that Foster missed most of the year with the knee injury. I actually talked to him about it a little bit the other night, and he says he's getting close to running and jumping. You would hope he'd be ready to go by the beginning of the season. If he's not, and it wouldn't outright shock me if he's not, you at least hope he's ready to go by ACC play. I think you can get by with him with, in the non-conference, and then hope to have him ready to roll by ACC play there in, late December, early January, whenever it starts next year. But yeah, that Clemson should be really good at the guard spots next year. How on earth did BV in Oklahoma get 19 verbals already when almost every other Power 4 school is still hovering around 5 to 7? It'll be interesting to see how many stick. Yeah, that last part there. Let's see how many sticks. It kind of has that Southern Cal feel to it where they get out in front of everybody almost every year, and a lot of them don't end up sticking. But yeah, they've been killing it, man. They've been absolutely killing it. What am I hearing about Tate? Is he pushing 17? I don't know that he's pushing for the starting job, but I've had a couple people tell me that he looks a little more polished than Denson does. He's definitely got the biggest arm on the team. I saw him work out at camp when he came to Clemson summer before last, man, and you could tell then how big of an arm he had. He's got the arm strength. The thing with him is he's got to get better with the accuracy, which is kind of fine tuning some of the details with your mechanics. Be interesting to see where he is, come fall after he's worked on some of that stuff all summer, after spring ball ends. But yeah, he is. Again, now I've not been to any of the practices. I've talked, obviously a couple of people I work with have been out there at both of them, and I talked to a couple other people that are out at other practices. And he, from the sounds of it, he has looked much sharper than I thought he would after having missed his entire senior season. He's been really good, but I don't know that he's pushing for the starting job. I'll say he might be pushing for the backup job, but I don't know that he's pushing for the starting job. After their first scrimmage last week, Dabo wasn't happy with any of the quarterbacks. He said there wasn't any of them good enough. But we're only 2 weeks into spring practice, and that day in that scrimmage, I know there were a bunch of starters on the offense that didn't play that day against a lot of the first-team defense, and the defense kind of dominated the day. Canuck, from what I'm reading, is basically down to 2 pitches, and Georgia Tech had that well scouted. His 93-mile-an-hour fastball is going to get smashed without a third pitch he can locate. He's got 3 that I think he locates pretty well. I didn't think it was a big deal when he tried to add some pitches to his repertoire last year. And maybe he did start to, focus a little too much on those, that it took a little bit away from the others. He's got the fastball, the changeup, and his breaking ball, curveball, slider, or whatever it is. I also do think there's a little bit of revision his history with Canuck. Like, he was not this like he was this pitcher that never walked guys in his freshman year. He issued some walks in his freshman year too, so he's always been a little bit of a nibbler. But he threw 33 pitches pretty well that year. So I don't know that it's only that he can locate too. To me, I wish he'd go back and stick with the 3. Ever since he's kind of added that cutter into the mix, there's some games where he starts to lean on it a little heavily, and it a lot of times he's not finding the zone with it. When he does, it gets hit. I do think that you should at least be having the conversation of whether we should move Michael Sharman to Friday and move Canuck back to Saturday or Sunday or wherever you prefer. We've seen him play or pitch against 2 Power 4 teams so far. And while South Carolina didn't kill him the way Georgia Tech did, he still had – he didn't look like an ace. If I'm remembering right, I think it was the 3rd inning that got him that night, and it was the 3rd inning against Georgia Tech. There's been a lot of instances throughout his career where, for whatever reason, he runs into trouble in that 3rd inning. But I do think it's at least worth having that conversation. Hey, are we better served by moving Sharman into that Friday night spot? Because you don't want to start series off 0-1, more often than not. You're obviously not going to face a lineup like Georgia Tech's week in and week out. But who gives you the best shot at winning week in and week out? So far to this point, it's been Sharman. Again, he didn't, he got hit a little bit against Georgia Tech. He gave up 5 hits, 5 2/3. He's charged with 3 earned runs. But that's giving you a shot. If you can't score more than 3-4 runs a game, you're in trouble no matter who's pitching. That's kind of what you need. And right now, I think he gives you the best shot. So I don't have any idea what kind of discussions are going on there, but to me, that's a conversation at least worth having at this point, especially right now when you're coming off a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, and everybody gets that extra day. So if you moved him up, it wouldn't, shorten his rest. One spring practice plus Dabo's comments, and a lot are convinced he blew it not getting a portal QB. Guess he should have gotten another kicker too. He dumped all over House. Yeah, he was not happy with Nolan Hoosier. Kind of the way he did, if you go back to last year, the last practice before spring break, he kind of railed on Cade a little bit too, because Cade was not very good that day. But whether or not Dabo should have went and gotten a quarterback out of the portal, that the jury is still out on that. I've been pretty clear in my opinion that that's probably the way they needed to go. I'm just, I hope he ends up proving me dead wrong. I'm just not a big believer in Vizina, at least not to the point to where he can get Clemson back to competing for spots in the playoff. And that's kind of where you want to be. If you're a Clemson fan, you're not competing for spots in meaningless bowl games or, 8-9 win seasons. You want to play in the ACC championship and have a chance to make the playoff. I'm not convinced Vizina's that guy. I think you got all I think you got plenty of pieces at the skill spots. I think the offensive line is still a little in question. I think Clemson could have benefited from going out at the very least getting, a veteran tackle to kind of bridge the gap to some of those younger guys. But it might end up being that, they're good at along the offensive line. It sounds like Easton Ware's been everything they thought he'd be. after returning from injury, that guy's got a high ceiling, in my opinion. There's a lot of young talent in that room, a lot of them that redshirted last year. Some of those freshmen that are early enrollees. I think Grant Wise is a guy that might could help you year one, maybe even Chance Barkley. So there's a couple of those true freshmen. But again, it's going to come down to the quarterback. Is Vizina that guy? Because, by all accounts, based on everything I've heard, Denson's not pushing for the starting job, not in any realistic fashion. So it kind of sounds like it's going to be Vizina, unless Tate, improves on his accuracy by the time we get to fall camp. I just, just based on what we've seen so far, and I get it, man. For 3 quarters, he looked sharp against SMU, but you got to take SMU's pass defense into that equation. It was the Mustangs were not very good on the back end of that defense. But on the flip side of that, you got to take into account most of the rest of his opportunities have come in garbage time, and there's not a lot to be gauged from that most of the time. So he's still a bit of an unknown commodity, but I don't know. I just, again, Vizina might end up proving me dead wrong. I feel a lot better about Vizina with Chad Marsh running the offense as opposed to Garrett Riley. But I don't know that I don't know that he's the kind of quarterback that can, or let's say I don't know that he's the prototypical Chad Morris quarterback. Not to say that Morris can't get anything out of him, because I think he can. It's going to be one of the, to me, that's by far the biggest storyline, throughout spring, fall camp, heading into next year is what do you have in Vizina, and would you have been better served by going and getting the quarterback out of the portal? Sharman probably pitched about as well as anyone this season who lasted 5 innings. Yeah, I thought he did well. He put you in position to have a chance to win, and he gave you a quality start. That's all you can ask out of your starting pitcher against the offense like that. So I mean, again, I think that's a conversation worth having. I'm not a college baseball coach. I am certainly not a pitching coach by any stretch. But to me, it's at least worth having the discussion. I think ever since Connacht's been moved into that Friday role, he's looked a little different. He's not been the same guy he was, most of that freshman year, at least most of the time anyways. Honestly, I thought Connacht was locating better on Thursday night. He gave up a lot of runs, but I think that's because of how ridiculous Georgia Tech's offense is. That's absolutely a part of it. Again, he didn't walk anybody the other night in that game. He struck out 8, but they knocked him around some too. He ended up, he only went 4 innings, gave up 9 hits, 6 earned runs, 8 runs total. Faced 22 batters, and 9 of them got hits off of him. Again, that's the game I watched the least of. So I can't, the fact that he didn't walk anybody, leads me to believe that he was at least locating. But again, there's also such a thing as getting too much of the plate. And if you're getting too much of the plate, that's when you're going to get tattooed. I can't sit here and say which one he was doing. I just remember one of the home runs that was like up here around the guy, man, and he turned around and jacked it out to left center. That one was definitely not a strike. Wasn't a mistake pitch or anything. Let's see here. Before I speak on that. Yeah, fortunately, the first game of the Notre Dame series is the one that's being streamed. So we'll get to watch him Friday, unless you want to travel up to South Bend to watch those other 2 games. But It's the Saturday and Sunday games that won't be streamed, so we'll get to watch him Friday, assuming he's still in that role, and I would think he would be. No more taking a week off. You took last week off, and baseball goes 1-3. Matter of fact, you know what? It's the last game that I had been to was Michigan State in Greenville. I was on vacation the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. So they did the 4-game sweep of LaSalle while I was gone. Then they went on the road and lost to Georgia Southern. Then came back home and lost 2 or 3 to Georgia. So I don't know that we can put that one on me. I'm usually willing to take the blame, when I think it's my fault. I did tell a couple people Saturday that all it took was for me to come back for them to win, just kidding around. But I also wasn't there last weekend when they took 4 from LaSalle. So, but I take your point. I'm supposed to be going to the 2 games in Charleston, man, but I hadn't heard back from College of Charleston or the Citadel yet, which is kind of odd. Maybe the question is, can Morris find enough strengths in Vizina to leverage them and still keep his plan on course if the offensive line can really help the running backs? A lot of it's going to be the scheme and how Morris is able to scheme to what Vizina, or scheme to his strengths. Let's say that, because he's not going to be the runner that Deshaun Watson was, or Trevor Lawrence was, or even Taj Boyd was. I do think he's probably a little bit better of a runner than he showed so far, but I don't think there's going to be some night and day difference. And I do think in Morris's offense, you need the quarterback to be a threat with his legs for you to get the most out of it. Let's put it that way. But yeah, a lot of it's going to come down to the offensive line. And, I tell you one thing about Chad Morris since he's been hired. And again, I made no bones about not being a big fan of the hire. Just, I thought it felt like you were trying to go back and, create some magic from something that happened in the past. And it usually doesn't work out well. But I'll say this. He has said everything. He's been saying all the right things, man. And he is such the polar opposite of Garrett Riley. And that team needed that. They needed that kind of in your face, we're going to coach you hard. We're going to make you be accountable because, I've talked about this before too. I do think there has been some complacency that's settled in to that program over the years. And maybe he's the guy that can, squeeze some of that complacency back out, get it out of there. Wonder if they roll Moeller out Wednesday against the Citadel since he didn't pitch this weekend. I was on vacation when he pitched and he only threw an inning, right? So I didn't get to see it. But from my understanding, his velo was way down. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So there might be a reason why you didn't see him this past weekend. And even if you do, it might be for an inning. I think he was on a strict pitch count the other day when he did start. I think he threw 20 pitches. I don't think they're going to let him throw much more than that his second time out either. They keep saying that he's going to be on the Talon Bell plan, and that's kind of the plan Talon Bell was on last year. But we'll see. Even if he does start, though, he'll basically serve as an opener and pitch an inning. But somebody remind me what his velo was in the game he pitched, because because I'm thinking it was not that it was. I'm thinking that it was down. But if I'm wrong about that, somebody please correct me. The Georgia Tech hitting coach, the guy that serves as the head coach now was the hitting coach. So he probably still serves in that role to some capacity. They do play in a smaller ballpark. I've never been to their ballpark, but yeah, we were talking about that over the weekend, how, they do play in a smaller ballpark. But that even if they played in a bigger one, their home run numbers would still be similar. They can absolutely mash, man. Yeah, if you want, I think Georgia is one of the few teams that has more home runs than Georgia Tech at this point. Man, that team, you see some of the numbers coming in, but you don't really grasp how good they are till you start watching it, man. It's just like there's no weak spot anywhere in that lineup. And, their pitching was good enough Thursday night. Their starter was good enough to get deep into the game. Same thing Saturday. Excuse me. Their starter Thursday night, man. I get screwed up on these Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. Tate McKee went 6 innings. He went deep. Their Friday starter game 2, he went into the 5th. They didn't really get deep into that. They used 3 relievers. And then on Sunday, they were able to really get into that pen. One of those guys, can't remember which one it was, maybe Sins or Spivey, maybe. One of those guys had been the Sunday starter up until this weekend. They had made a change, but that'll be the biggest question for Georgia Tech is the pitching, because I don't think it's elite, but I think it's good enough because their offense is so good. That was the game. That was the game they only had the one camera for, so they wouldn't be showing the velocity. From my understanding, it was like 89, 90, if I'm remembering right. And pre-injury, he was mid-90s, from my understanding. Yeah. All of their balls are hit hard, man. One of the D1 baseball guys was in Clemson or he was at least there Saturday. I'm assuming he was there all weekend. And he was sitting beside me in the press box, and they always let the D1 guys hook in the TrackMan. So I had TrackMan right beside me, and I could see every ball that was hit and how hard it was hit off the bat. That's how I know that all their balls, man, almost all of them are 95 off the bat. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some here and there that they don't hit on good, but generally speaking, even their outs are just tattooed. That's a dangerous lineup, man. And yeah, the Lackey is probably one of the best catchers in the country. The guy played during their midweek game last week. He played every position in the field except for pitcher. He played 8 spots that night. $90 sounds right. What's the reason for playing these Thursday? TV changed that one. That was because if you notice, at least one of those games was on the ACC network. I don't remember which one, but one of them might have been the game 2, the one that started at 8 or 7 or whatever. I can't remember. At least one of them was on the ACC network, so yeah, that was a television thing. Somebody told me that had they known that the series was going to be moved to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they wouldn't have played a midweek in Augusta on Tuesday. How true that is, I don't know. Somebody told me that. If Vazina struggles and they do go with someone else, who do you think gets the nod. Yeah, I don't know, man. It would depend on, when that change was made, right? Do you are you sitting at 3-4 or 3-5 and just totally out of everything, and you make the change then? And I think you probably roll with Tate if you think he's your quarterback of the future, and especially if he's kind of looking better in practice than Denson. If we're talking before the season, I think a lot of that's just going to depend on who you think gives you the best chance at winning week one. I think there's a lot of variables in play that could change that answer. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have some packages maybe, designed to get Denson the ball and let him see if he can do some damage running the ball. But it doesn't sound like he's anywhere close to being as polished of a passer as he needs to be to, lead an offense at this level. Not saying he can't get there. I just think that's how raw he was coming out of high school. And I've said it many times on here that I thought, that Tate missing pretty much his entire senior season was going to hurt his development. And man, I've the only negative thing I've heard about Tate so far in spring practice is that he's not quite as accurate as he needs to be. But man, that he throws heaters. And you like a quarterback with a big arm. I mean, I don't think it's something that you have to have. You just have a guy you need a guy that can make all the throws. But man, if you got a guy that's got elite level arm strength, man, that's what you want. I'm reading reports that Reynolds is in a position to be tagged as number 2 in August based on where he is today. Like I said earlier, don't be surprised if he's not QB2. That's just, again, I've not seen it. I've not been out there yet. But that's just based on what I've heard. So whatever you're reading, I'm kind of been hearing some similar things. I even thought the pitching as a whole did well for the most part, considering the lineup they were facing, the fact all of them are hitting at least 400. I don't know that every single one was hitting 400, but there wasn't a guy in that lineup hitting below 300. Again, the guy in the 9-hole was hitting 400, man. And his slugging percentage was insane, and he had not even hit a home run yet. He didn't hit his first home run to this weekend. Curse was his name. But yeah, let's see if this thing's got averages in it. It doesn't, so I can't look at this and tell. But I don't think every single one was hitting 400, but a majority of them were, man. Again, they can rake, man. Weekend could be summed up that Georgia Tech hit the front end of our pitching roster. The Tigers hit the back end of their roster. Georgia Tech played better in the field. That's where Clemson's got to improve. Is clean up some of the errors. If you're Jaron Purify, you can't get picked off at first base there early in that game. I'm gonna give. I know McClatty got picked off right after that, but I'm going to give him a little bit of leeway because he kind of slipped trying to get back to the bag. If he doesn't slip, he's probably safe. I don't think he was a sitting duck after he slipped. Like, he's just too good, and he's known for trying to get behind you there at first base and get you. But you can't have those kind of mistakes in those kind of games. And we've talked about before, Clemson's got to get some of that fielding cleaned up, man. They're still making a few too many errors. What do I know about the Jake Owen concert? Probably less than you, to be quite honest. From the looks of it, the concert is being held where everyone parks for camp. Yeah, see, I don't even know the answer to that. I don't even know what day it's on. Let's see. Yeah, it's on Jervy Meadows, so that's where it's going to be, is back there. That's on April 11th. Fortunately, and Clemson's got a baseball game at home that day. That'll be fun. Yeah, I don't understand that. Let's see. Clemson's baseball program will serve as an opening act on April 11th. Yeah, so it sounds like it's going to be back there in Jervy Meadows somewhere. You know exactly where, I can't tell you. I think the lowest batting average is like 360. Yeah, I was fixing to look that up. Let's see. Lackey's hitting 479. Hernandez is hitting 449. Carson Curse, who was the 9-hole guy, 424. Will Baker, 424. Ryan Zuckerman, who I think he hit a couple of home runs this weekend, he's hitting 387. Jaron Advincula, 375. Kent Schmidt, 375. Caleb Daniel, 339. Drew Burrus, 313. But he's also got 5 home runs and 17 RBIs. And then you got Drew Rogers, who's hitting 310. But all the ones down to Burris, those are the everyday guys that have played 19, 20 games so far. And all of those except Schmidt. Schmidt's only appeared in 12 games. So all of those except Schmidt and Rogers have had at least 59 at bats. Man, that's impressive, man. They have hit 46 home runs already. They've got 109 extra base hits. They are slugging 683 as a team, man. That's insane. Yeah, that was one of the bright spots to come out of the weekend. Dally had a couple of hits Friday. He went Thursday. Then he went hitless in game 2. And then he had, 3 hits in game 3. Seems like he's starting to kind of come around. You know, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter kind of frustrated that Bakich has stuck with him this long because he was struggling mightily. I mean, that's just there's no sugarcoating that. And there's been a lot of frustration of why he's stuck in the lineup. And I actually asked Bakich about that after the game Saturday, and he said, "Yeah, we've given him a longer leash, even though he's not been in the program. You know, like some of these other guys." He kind of compared it to Will Taylor 2 years ago. He said, "I remember when Will Taylor was 0 for February and half of March, and then all of a sudden he hits 3 home runs in a game and he's off and running." They're hoping these signs we're seeing is Dally starting to come out of it, because even on some of the balls that he's out on, he's hitting those hard. Just a lot of them are being hit right at people, and he's starting to use the entire field. He's not trying to yank everything or pull it. Hopefully he can build on this weekend, because he had, let's see here, I want to make sure I get it right. All right, he was 0 for in game 1. Then he was 2 for 4 in game 2. And he was 3 for 5 in game 3 and had 3 RBIs in that game. And he only struck out once, twice, 3 times. Well, he struck out once each game. So, I mean, he seems like he's starting to come around, and they need him to because they were dependent on him. Man, I do think it's a good sign that even without him, you're at 27 home runs for the season. I mean, it don't compare to Georgia Tech's 40-something, but 46. But, you're on pace to hit more than last year if you're Clemson. And let's also add in that I would imagine that Georgia Tech's payroll is probably a bit higher than Clemson's. I was surprised Fultz didn't get any at-bats this past weekend. He was one of the few bright spots from North Augusta. And I would know I was there from that. Well, that would have been the only way to watch it, seeing as that one wasn't streamed either, so you had to be there. So I didn't see that one either, so I can't really comment on what he did. He was 2 for 2. I know that much. The way Dillard played against Michigan State that night, and he hits that monster home run to walk it off, he kind of earned a little bit more playing time. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's starting to fizzle out a little bit. He only had 1 hit all weekend against Georgia Tech. He was 1 for 6. You need more production out from that spot in the lineup. And that's not a knock on Dillard. He's still hitting. He's hitting 296 right now. He was up to 348 going into Georgia Tech. But I think that's the spot where you got to get more production than what you got this past weekend. Absolutely. And Fultz is a guy I was kind of expecting to play a lot more than he has so far. Because to this point, he only has 25 at-bats. That's the same amount Jay Dillard's got. Georgia Tech's team batting average right now. Well, if I can find it here, I know it's 393. So that sounds about right because I'm sure it came down a little bit this weekend. Tristan Becerra forced to leave. He was not forced to leave. Yeah, he's tearing it up at Ole Miss. If you go and look at Tristan Becerra's career at Clemson before this year, there was nothing there that suggested he was going to have this breakout kind of year, and you needed to. So they went out and got guys like Ty Daly. He was the active home run leader in D1 coming into the season. Went out and got a guy like Nate Savoy, 2 corner outfielders. You already got a Crichton that was already playing more than Becerra. Clemson was tinkering with, the idea of turning Becerra into a pitcher. That's how he blew out his elbow and had to have Tommy John surgery. So, they kind of, nobody forced him to leave, but the writing was kind of on the wall there. Again, if you just look at what he had done while he was at Clemson, there was nothing, there. He'd have some bright spots, and then he'd go into a long-term slump. Then he'd have a bright spot for a 2 or 3 game stretch, and then he'd slump again. And he's found his stride down there at Ole Miss for sure. He is absolutely torching the ball. Also, Danny Nelson is going to have a very bright future if he keeps it up. That's a dude right there, man. Clemson's got some dude from some freshman pitchers that are dudes. Danny Nelson, Eston Simpson, Dylan Harrison, and Simpson and Nelson are the hard throwers. Harrison doesn't throw quite as hard as those guys, but he knows how to pitch, man. He knows how to pitch. He knows how to locate. To me, I like watching the power arms as much as anybody, but I like watching the guys like Dylan Harrison or Michael Sharman, man, just go to work. They're not blowing guys away. They're beating you with their pinpoint accuracy. We're not going to see Dan Margulies because he had Tommy John surgery. He was another fairly highly touted pitcher. That's a freshman. He's a left-hander. But yeah, there's some dudes on this team that are freshmen, man, particularly the pitchers. But yeah, Danny Nelson, man, you see him walk out there, man, and he's not this, big burly guy. He's just coming out there with his curly hair coming out from up under his hat, and you're like, oh man, that dude's gonna beat us. No way, man. And then he just gets on there and he's on 95, 96 and hitting 97 sometimes, man. And you're like, damn, where'd that come from? It's kind of the same thing with Deion Brown. That little guy, that you telling me that little guy's gonna throw 95? And he gets out there, man, and it's like a slingshot. Pow. But yeah, Danny Nelson's got a very bright future, as do some of those other freshman pitchers. Dillard made some mental errors at third base this weekend. His time in the starting lineup may be coming to an end. Yeah, see, I didn't see any of those. I know you're not the first person that told me that, though. He now he's got 2 errors on the season in 8 starts, and not all mental errors are recorded as actual errors. Let's get that out of the way too. So, but yeah, you got to get more production out of that spot, man, for sure. Might as well, and that leads us into this. I was expecting a lot more from Clavon at the plate, but unfortunately, it just hasn't worked out for him so far. If you're going to have McClatty in center and Clavon kind of, playing in a reserve role, run Fultz out there at third, man. He's got the big bat. Let him take some lumps defensively if he needs to, but he'll kind of, it'll be trial by fire somewhat, but he'll learn on the job and he'll get better as he goes. That's kind of the way I see it. But yeah, Clavon is definitely, man, you want to talk about a guy that has struggled. He has struggled mightily, man. He's hitting 148. He is 4 of 27 on the year with 3 RBIs, and he's got the 1 home run. Fortunately, we're talking about a guy that's still young. He's still an underclassman, so it's not like you need him to do it all right now, man. There's still some time for growth there, and you got some depth that you can use to overcome, not getting what you were hoping to get out of him. If I'm not mistaken, he is just – let me make sure before I say that. I want to say he's just a sophomore. Yeah, he's just a sophomore. So he's still got some developing to do, and hopefully start to see that upside as a junior and as a senior. But he is definitely – he's probably – of all the transfers that they brought in, and he's probably been the bigger disappointment. That's saying something, seeing how slow the kind of slow start Dally got off to. Did I see the hilarious hit by pitch in the FSU softball game? I actually did. Man, it was a very heads-up play by the batter. But I think in softball, you're not allowed to position yourself in front of the ball to get hit. And that's what the girl did. She moved her foot out so it would roll into her. For those that haven't seen it, I forget who they were playing, but the ball slipped out of the pitcher's hand and it just kind of rolled up to the plate on the ground. And the girl in the batter's box moved her foot back so the ball would roll into her foot, and she was hit by a pitch, and she took first. Very heads-up play by the batter, and she got away with it. If you can get away with it, go for it. Syracuse pitcher. There you go. Deion Brown, man, you're talking about a guy that does not look like he could throw anywhere close to 96, 97. That's Deion Brown. I think I've told this story before, probably more than once, but I remember when he was a freshman and I was at one of the inter-squad scrimmages, and somebody was telling me that if he hung around and kept working on it, that he was going to be throwing mid-90s, within a couple of years. And here we are 2 years later. He's 95, 96, 97. And man, that he when you start talking about him and Danny Nelson, that's two young dudes on the back of, well, I shouldn't say young with Deion. Well, he's a redshirt sophomore, so we can still say it with him. That's two young dudes on the back end of that thing, man, that on the back end of your staff that you can roll out there in those high leverage situations. The lineup showed flashes of what they can be on Saturday. I just want to see them show that more consistently. Yeah, I would have liked to, again, I didn't see it all, but just looking at the numbers, I'd have liked to see them be, that first game against Georgia Tech was just a wash. You're going to get your ass beat like that from time to time. But that second game, man, it was, that was a ball game. It was 4-2. It was 4-2 going into the seventh. Tech puts up 4 runs in the seventh and another in the eighth. Kind of finish it off. Or yeah, it was 4-2. You had a ball game going on, and Clemson actually out-hit Georgia Tech in game 2. But they were not very good, hitting with runners on base or hitting with runners in scoring position. They just couldn't get the key hit that night. It goes back to that word you just used, consistency. You've got to be able to move the runners when they're on base, and particularly when they're in scoring position. You got to be able to knock them in somehow, some way. Dillard didn't cover third on a force out by the outfield on a force out fielded by the shortstop, so it gave Georgia Tech more life. And yeah, those are the kind of errors that aren't going to show up in the box score. And those are the kind of mental things that Bakich doesn't show a whole lot of patience for a lot of times. It just depends on the situation, but there have been some instances where if you make a couple of mental errors like that in a short amount of time, you're going to watch for a little bit. I think McClatty's a prime example of that. You go back to last year where, it might have been the year. I can't remember. There was one. It might have been last year against South Carolina. He couldn't get a bunt down. He got picked off a time or two, and all of a sudden he's not really playing anymore. Well, man, that has really flown by. We've already been rolling over an hour here, I see. Am I going to be in Charleston tomorrow? I'm actually going to be in Charleston 100% tomorrow. Now, whether I'm at the game is a different story. I have sent a couple of emails over there. I have yet to hear back from them. I have not heard back from College of Charleston or Citadel yet, to be quite honest. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. But my plan is to be there for sure. I ain't gonna beg for the. I can just come right back home after I'm done with my business in Charleston tomorrow rather than hang around. All right, a big thank you to all of you guys that tuned in tonight. And I know football's on break for the week. Be back at it. Maybe Monday. I think it's the first practice back after spring break. Might not be much of a game, but I would like to see the Clemson women get past USC Southern Cal and get the matchup with the Gamecocks. Yeah, I think everybody was a little surprised they got the seed that they got and ended up in Columbia. Sounded like Poppy was even surprised a little bit. But both the men and the women's team both got brutal draws. It's an uphill battle for sure for both of them. But man, I don't watch a lot of women's basketball, but Poppy's got that team on an upward trajectory, man. He is doing, it seems like every button he's pushed is the right one so far, and in laying the foundation and building a program. He's already brought in some good talent. He's got some good talent on the way still. That was that right now looks like an excellent hire by Graham Neff. Yeah, I think football practice gets back into gear next Monday. But when it does, we'll certainly have you covered, man. ClemsonInsider.com. We'll have you covered for the basketball tournament this week, both the baseball games and anything in between, man. I got a couple of recruiting interviews I got to write up. Had a long conversation with Asher Gitto. Had a long one with Peyton Miller, 4-star offensive line target. Gitto's an interesting one because he's a 2028 guy who is heavily considering reclassing to 27. He's a 5-star in the 28 class. And he told me while we were on the phone that, he's got the academic part worked out where if he wants to reclass, he'll be able to. Now it's all going to come down to, the programs he's most interested in, what their plans are for him, and do they need him more in 27 or 28? And he was at the elite retreat. You rarely see a rising sophomore get invited to that thing, which is what happened here, a rising junior. So he was a year behind all those other guys that were on campus. But as soon as he announces he's going to reclass, if he does, that's an offer he's going to have from Clemson. And, based on the conversation I had with him, and, he talked about that visit for like 15 minutes straight without stopping. All I did was ask, hey, man, how'd the visit go? And I didn't have to say anything else, man. He's one of the easiest interviews ever. But he just raved and raved and raved about it. But his decision is going to come down to, if schools want him to come in and redshirt, then he sees no reason to reclassify. Might as well stay in high school, play another year. But if these teams are intent on using him as a freshman, that's what's going to drive the decision. He's got to have it made by May or, by the end of May, so he can kind of map out officials if he chooses to go that route. I lean towards thinking he's probably going to reclass. And if he does, I think Clemson's in a good spot. He's still got a lot of other visits to take, but the bar has been set really high. He is a guy that's already spent a lot of time in Clemson. He goes to the same high school Naheem Burrows went to, and he and Burrows and their quarterback at the bowl school, Luke Tolan, he's a 28 quarterback. They're all real good buddies, and Tolan's family's got a house on Lake Kiowee there in the upstate. So, those guys have spent a lot of time there on Lake Kiowee and in the Clemson area. So he's already very familiar with it and loves the area and everything it's got to offer. So it's a lot of things that are lining up well for Clemson here if he does indeed decide to reclass. So look for that conversation in the next day or two. And again, we'll have all the basketball stuff, all the baseball stuff, and anything else that pops off. Want to thank Trey Humphreys with Old River Real Estate, title sponsor on the show these days. He's looking to expand his clientele by providing the best customer service in the industry. Residential, commercial, investing, buying, or selling, Trey would love the opportunity to help you. 843-617-6548. Give Trey a call today. Also, Adams Pest and Termite Control. It's in the title, man. They handle all your pests, termites. They do moisture control right here in the PD. Give Mike and his crew a call, 843-858-3166. The plan right now is to have a baseball show Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Ashby and myself. The time might have to get adjusted because as I was on vacation last week, Ashby's on vacation this week, so she'll have to do it while she's on vacation, and I have to work around her schedule there a little bit. I asked her, did she want to take the week off? She said no, because we already took last week off because of the ACC basketball tournament. So be on the lookout for that. Right back here next Monday, 7 p.m. Oh, got somebody that said, I met Luke Tolan. Yeah, I've talked to him a few times, man. He seems like a good kid. But right back here next Monday, 7 p.m., we're going to that is the same day that we're going to get the viewing window in practice. So let's just say right back here next Monday, we might have to push the start time back a little bit. So be on the lookout for that. I'll post it on Twitter if we're going to push it back. Maybe we might have to start at 8 instead of 7 that day because I'm going to practice that day. I got to lay my eyes on some stuff rather than just get it secondhand. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be back here next Monday. TBD on the time. Until then, check us out on the site, ClemsonInsider.com.